All right, in this video, I'm gonna talk about the biggest problem that I see with portrait paintings and how to fix it. All right, welcome to Paint Coach. My name's Chris Fornatero, and I'm here to help simplify oil painting so that you can get better faster. So the biggest problem I see with portrait painting is incorrect values. Value is how light or dark a color is. And most people that think they have a color problem actually have a value problem. So the way this video is gonna go is that I'm gonna talk about and show you ways that mishandling values can show up in your work. Then I'm gonna talk about some ways that you can get better at handling values. And then I'm gonna give you some tips on handling values in a monochromatic portrait. Always remember, the viewer can forgive the wrong color. They won't forgive the wrong value. And the harder it is to pinpoint the correct value or value transition in relationships, the harder the painting is going to be. This is why child portraits can be so difficult, because children don't have very defined features. And it's defined features that are gonna create more obvious shifts in value. So with a child's face, it's very smooth. The value transitions are gonna be very soft and very subtle. And when you don't have the skill to identify the correct value and value shift, it's gonna make it hard to paint those soft features, and a lot of people will make them more defined than they really are, which is why a lot of people have the problem of when they do a child portrait, the child always looks older than they should be. Another problem associated with values that I see a lot of students struggle with is that they do what I call leaving values on the table. They either don't indicate the darkest dark that they can, or the lightest light, or both. Remember, painting is a two-dimensional medium. We're not sculptors. We don't have the advantage of working in 3 dimensions. So we have to use values to create form. And if you're not using all the values available to you, you run the risk of things looking flat. Take a look at this example portrait from a student of mine. Their painting is looking really great, but if I throw it into black and white real quick, you can see that if they would have pushed the light values a little bit more and found about 1 or 2 more lighter values, they could have added a lot more form to this portrait. All right, so what can you do to make yourself better at seeing and handling values? Well, there's a few things, like a few exercises that you can do. The first exercise is the arbitrary color exercise. So the exercise is that you use a black and white reference photo, but on your palette, you put out a bunch of random colors. So as you paint and get new colors on your brush, you have to figure out where on the value scale that color lies. Color does not matter in this exercise. You're only thinking about the value of a color. And it's a great exercise because at the end you get a really cool, colorful painting, and it shows you that values are way more important than colors. Because the colors of this portrait are completely unrealistic and they're completely arbitrary. But since all the colors are in the right value, it's going to work. This exercise is great to help you identify the value of a color. Now, another great exercise you can do is doing a master copy. Find a painter whose portraits you really like and focus on mixing up and using the exact same colors and values that they did. Every single time I do this, I feel like I learned so much. For example, I did this John Singer Sargent portrait master copy. And while I was doing it, I was so surprised at the colors that I found on my palette and how subtle I could get with these shifts in values of those colors. It seemed like every single time I mixed up a new color and laid it down, I realized I had to change the value of that color to be more similar to the colors and values around it. I tend to talk a lot about subtlety in painting because as I paint and learn more, I find that subtlety, whether it's colors, values, simplification, is really a mark of somebody who knows what they're doing. And I find that I'm most impressed by the painters that can be very subtle in utilizing the fundamentals of painting. But the exercise that I think can be the most valuable, and probably the one you should start out with, is doing a black and white or a monochromatic portrait. By getting rid of color, it's gonna force you to only think in terms of value. You're just gonna be thinking dark or light. It's also gonna be easier to see value relationships and see how subtle shifts in value can be in a portrait. While doing a black and white or monochromatic portrait, here's some things to keep in mind while you're doing it. When you first start out, try and map out the portrait in just 2 or 3 values. Squint your eyes and see the big value shapes. You don't have to find every single little value right at the start. It's much better to keep things simple at the beginning and get the big value relationships first, and then find the subtle value shifts within those big shapes. Also, do not stay in one area for too long. Remember, value is relative. It's relative to what is happening around it. So the only way that you're going to be able to dial in the right value of a certain area is by making sure you've developed the areas around it. Another helpful tip is don't get too specific too quickly. It's very easy to see little highlights and wrinkles right at the beginning, but you really want to restrain yourself and see how long you can go without picking up that small brush or without identifying those small little shapes. That's a very good way to get lost and confused in a painting, by getting too specific too quickly. Another very helpful tip is be willing to make mistakes. You're gonna do a lot of, painting in values and then painting them back out, then painting them back in, then darken them and lighten them. That's pushing and pulling the paint, which is one of the advantages of using oil paint. So just know that no matter what you put down, you can alter it later. Knowing that you can always change the value and dial it in right will give you more confidence while you're painting, which I feel is very important. The last thing you want to be is timid and careful while you're oil painting, especially at the beginning of a painting. You want to be bold with your brushwork and with your values. That's going to give your painting a lot of life. You're not going to get the right values right off the bat. It's going to take a few tries, and that's okay. Embrace that and know that you can keep pushing and pulling until you get it right and paint with more confidence. Now, to make sure you're not leaving values on the table, look for areas in your painting that are reading as flat. Because a lot of times that means that you don't have enough value shapes. And look to see, are you getting the darkest dark that you can? Are you getting the lightest light that you can? Try and figure out where those are and add more form to that flat area. Now, when it comes towards the end of the painting of adding in your lightest values, be careful not to make them too bright. I find that a lot of people tend to overpaint their lighter values opposed to their darker values. And a lot of times they make the brights too bright. So when you lay down those lighter values, lay down one mark, step back, assess it with all the other values around it, and see if you can get away with making it slightly darker. All right, so that's today's lesson on values in portraits. Hope you liked it. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you got questions, leave them in the comments section below. And if you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting.